Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today we're going to be revisiting the huge Nazem Kadri trade 3 years later, how it's developing for Toronto and how it's developing for the Colorado Avalanche, and with Nazem Kadri scoring that game for overtime win, putting the Avs just one win away from the Stanley Cup final, we're going to be asking the question, is this the biggest mistake the Leafs have made in recent memory? Watch till the end for all of the questions, all of the answers, all of the discussion surrounding the situation. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are new. 50% of the people that are watching are not subscribed, and if you like hockey content, this channel is the place to be. And also for 55k, we're going to be giving away this Dallas Stars beanie as well as this Canes 2018 draft hat. At some point in this video, I'll be announcing a code that you guys can put in the comments, and if you put that in the comments, it'll be entered into the giveaway. So watch till the end so you do not miss it. Now, the Nazem Kadri trade has to be one of the most interesting deals over the past 5 years. Now we can obviously say it hasn't worked out too well for the Leafs, but at the time, there was a big outcry to see a Nazem Kadri trade, with him being suspended in the 2019 playoffs and big time being a big reason why the Leafs end up losing to the Bruins in that first round. There was a big outcry to get Kadri off the roster, find a way to trade him, and hopefully get a top 4 defenseman back. On paper, Toronto tried their best, but it didn't really work out too well for them. Now, going back to that day on July 1st, 2019, here were the trade details between Colorado and Toronto. With the Toronto Maple Leafs, they would receive Tyson, Barrie, Alex Kerfoot, and a 2026 round pick, which would become Joe Miller. In exchange, the Colorado Avalanche would get Nazem Kadri, defenseman Calle Rosen, and a 2023 round pick, which would become Jean-Luc Foudy, who I think is going to be a really interesting player in the future for the Avs and can have some great offensive potential there. But that was the trade that we saw. And even on the day that this happened, even though I thought it could have been an even trade, at the same time, you still had to admit that for the Leafs, Barrie was not really the defenseman they needed. They already had offensive D-man, of course, in the past with Jacob Gardner and with Morgan Riley. So at that point, you were adding another offensive defenseman onto the roster and a guy that wasn't going to really push too much of that team, especially in the playoffs when you need as much defense as possible. I just felt at the time it wasn't the defenseman that the Leafs needed, especially if you're going to trade a player like Nazem Kadri, who, when he's not getting suspended, is an excellent top 6 centerman. That's the thing, though, for Colorado. They bet that Kadri would get back to form and hopefully make less dirty plays and would eventually get a lot cleaner. And if he did have that happen, then they would have a top 6 centerman who could play right behind Nathan MacKinnon and be easily in that slot. And we're seeing just how much it's been in Colorado's favor since then. Obviously, Alex Kerfoot is kind of the underrated part of this deal, who had a fantastic season this last year and is a big part of that Leafs core in some ways, but he does not match the intensity and the overall play that Kadri can bring, and on paper, the Leafs absolutely lost this deal. And when we look at how each player has performed since the trade, the Avs definitely do have the advantage. Now, there is the chance that, of course, Kadri does walk this offseason and that Kerfoot is the only player still left on his same roster from this trade, but at the same time with Kadri at age 31, he's been huge for the Avs in so many ways. When we look at the first year that he was on the roster, he didn't perform all too incredibly. He got 36 points, 51 games, and in 2021 got 32 points in 56 games, but this year is truly the year, 2022, where everything changed for him. In 71 games, got 28 goals, 59 assists, 87 points, was on a torrid pace, especially at the beginning of the year, and even though he slowed down a little bit in the second half, even if he slowed down, he was still 16 points above point per game, and obviously, this Leafs roster would be much better without him, but I also think you could make the case that if you never traded Kadri, if you just were able to keep him, you might have just been able to not have to sign John Tavares. You might just have to be in a position where you maybe get a more defensive third-line centerman, and you could go Matthews, Kadri, and somebody else at that spot, and likely be able to fill out the rest of that roster way better than if you were spending $11 million on Tavares and keeping Kadri around. It would have definitely been a maddening situation for Leafs fans at the time, because they definitely wanted him gone, but at the same time, with revisionist just history, looking back on it, the hindsight definitely goes in favor of Colorado, but especially again this year, some of that was definitely some better shooting luck and some better positioning, but at the same time, Kadri had his best year at age 31, and he would have absolutely, in my opinion, put the Leafs over the top in that Lightning series. But you just see how impactful he's been for Colorado, and also in the playoffs, he's been huge for them too. Going over the years, of course, in 2020, he got 18 points in 15 games, only played 2 games in 2021 and got an assist for 1 point. And this year, when he has played in 14 games, has 7 goals, 8 assists for 15 points. Always when he is playing, always when he is on the ice, has been so impactful for this Avs team. And you also look at the face-off percentage, 53% in 2020, 58% in 2021, 50% in 2022. Not bad whatsoever. So he's putting in other styles of game as well, while also putting up those amazing offensive results. And to me, I look at just what he's done in the playoffs since he got dealt from Toronto, and it's a pretty big difference. Obviously, going away from the Leafs in the playoffs helps, but now with this Avs team, he's found a different form, and maybe a form that he might not have unlocked if he was still with the Leafs. But then we go on to, of course, the other players that the Leafs got back in the trade, starting with Tyson Barrie, who, of course, now isn't with the team anymore, signed with the Edmonton Oilers, and he only lasted 1 full season with the Leafs, which just is the worst part of this trade, because going into it, the Leafs expected to get a top 4 defenseman that would be a big part of the team going forward, but Barrie was really anything but. Even though in 70 games, he was still pretty great in terms of the point production, it was just not a stylistic fit, and again, that goes back to just the bad fit from the trade itself. Barrie wasn't the defenseman that Toronto needed, and they ended up letting him go and signing with Edmonton, where he's still been great offensively, even if the defense has definitely lagged behind. But at the same time, again, you go back to that trade and what the Leafs needed. They needed a top 4 D-man, and Barrie, with what the Leafs already had, wasn't going to get too much opportunity and was going to be back behind guys like Morgan Rielly, which just set him up for absolute failure, not being up on that power play as much as he should have, and you see the results and the cost of it. They could have gotten so much more back and a player that would still be on the team, but only 1 season, and of course, when it comes to the actual playoffs, 0 points in 2020, horrible against Columbus, and that was it for his Leafs tenure. Now, thankfully for Toronto, just like Nazem Kadri, Alex Kerfoot had a bit of a career year this year at age 27. He was pretty huge for the Leafs offense, and you see how he's been since he went away from Colorado. Always been being a pretty solid point producer in his first couple of seasons with the Avs. Got 2 straight back-to-back 40-plus point years with, of course, 19 goals and 15 goals. But in the first couple of years with Toronto, it really wasn't looking that great whatsoever. In 2020, in 65 games, had 28 points. In 2021, 23 points, 56 games. And after 2021 specifically, I think a lot of people were asking for Kerfoot to be dealt with his higher cap hit and not really being as valuable as he should have in a third-line role. This year was much better for him, and again, he started up pretty well. 82 games, 13 goals, 38 assists for 51 points. Likely not going to get back to that level anytime soon, probably a career year for him for sure, but he definitely raised his value. But before this year, you can imagine Barrie not being on the team and Kerfoot only putting up 23 points in 56 games. It was an absolute failure for the Leafs, and even though Kerfoot has been better, it still hasn't made it much too important, especially compared to what Kadri is doing and how better he was compared to Kerfoot. Even if Kerfoot had a much better year, there was still a 36-point difference between the two. And of course, for Kerfoot in the playoffs, he's been overall decent. In 2020, got 3 assists, 3 points in 5 games. In 2021, that was one of the better Leafs against the Habs with 6 points, 5 assists in 7 games. This last year, though, against the Lightning, wasn't really all too great, and kind of like some other players, just kind of completely evaporated when it mattered most. 2 points in 7 games, and not good enough. For the Leafs, he has been solid and has been, I guess, better than they expected in some way, especially this year, but still, that is your return from Nazem Kadri. Absolutely horrible. Now let's go to the cap hits as well, because this is Nazem Kadri, and with his last deal with the Avs and with the Leafs as well, through 2017 to 2022, he was making $4.5 million in both the cap hit and the AAV, with no performance bonuses or anything. But at $4.5 million, you compare that to what the Leafs were getting with Alexander Kerfoot, who was making $3.5, and again, John Tavares at $11 million. Let's say they never make that deal, and let's say they never sign Tavares. You you'd have Kadri as a very solid fit there still in that top six, especially on that second line, and you could have whoever you wanted as the third line centerman. But let's say again that trade is never made, and you just have that raise of $4.5 million with Kadri. Again, you never spend those $11 million with John Tavares. Imagine how more balanced this Leafs roster could be. Even though Tavares was pretty great in the last couple of games versus Tampa Bay, at the same time, I think if you were able to round out the roster a lot more, not be paying Tavares $11 million, to me, there'd be a lot more flexibility. And with some of the issues on the wings, with some of the issues with the goaltending, to me, those would have been fixed by now. You could have gone after some major guys and made some other big trades instead of going after Kadri. And again, this whole video, it's hindsight is 2020, but at the same time, you look back on it, and that $4.5 million deal, even though he's due for a raise, and you'd have to definitely give him a big one this offseason if you're Toronto, if you kept him, at the same time, he was only making $4.5 million, and that was one of the biggest problems, I think, with that deal, was even though Kadri didn't feel like a fit anymore at the time and felt like he was on his way out, that contract was still amazing. Even if he didn't come up in the clutch moments with those bad suspensions and everything, he was still at a great cap hit. And for Toronto at the time, and even now more than ever, they needed as much cap space as humanly possible. And you just imagine what they could have done with the wings, what they could have done with goaltending instead. And you just see the glaring issues with this Leafs team. On paper, yes, Tavares has been good in some areas, but if you instead kept Kadri, if you didn't go for Kerfoot, if you got a different third line center, you probably could have gone out for probably could have gotten another top six winger that this Leafs team, I think, desperately needs. You could have gotten a much better goaltender, even if Campbell has been good in spurts. And to me, you could fix the glaring issues with this Leafs team. Again, hindsight is 2020, but you look at the cap situation, and it's hard to not make that correlation. Also, at this point, might as well mention the code for the giveaway is Austin Matthews MVP. Put it in the comments, whatever you need to do, put that phrase in the comments, and you will be entered for the giveaway. It'll be announced in the next video, whoever the winner is, so make sure you watch that as well. But it's genuinely one of the most interesting trades to talk about over the last little bit, with just how many moving parts there are and just how weird it's been since then and how much it's benefited one team over the other. At the same time, though, it looks like Kadri is going to join the long list of former Leafs that would end up winning the Stanley Cup with somebody else. Phil Kessel, of course, Tyler Bozak, a lot of other players throughout the years, and now Nazem Kadri joining that group. It's a trend right now, and for the Leafs, some of these big-time players are finding success elsewhere. Obviously, their playoff success hasn't come yet, and although I do think it will come eventually, trading Nazem Kadri has not worked out. But you could also make the same argument that Kadri would never be as good as he is now and never as clean as he is now with Toronto, and that could definitely be the case. But at the same time, it seems like it was a reactionary trade by the Leafs, reactionary deal that the Leafs fan base wanted to make, and we're seeing how it's kind of biting them in the butt right now and benefiting the Avs in such a big way. The top four defensemen the Leafs were supposed to get back played 1 year and wasn't a fit, and even the player they got back in Alex Kerfoot wasn't even showing much value at all until this year, and even then, he could still be dealt this offseason. So we'll see what happens, but this Kadri deal is definitely benefiting the Avs, and the Avalanche are the big-time winners, and not just the Kadri trade, but so far, the Stanley Cup playoffs. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know in the chat and in the comments down below what you guys think about this whole trade, this whole situation. Which team do you think wins? Do you think the Leafs win more in this trade than I'm putting out there? Do you think the Avs are even bigger winners? Let me know your thoughts on this whole deal 3 years later. Of course, make sure you share this video with your friends. Get it out there to anybody you guys know, any hockey fans you guys know online. Make sure you click on this card for all of my trade rumor content right on one playlist. My name is Nathan. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.